Alright guys, I'm making up a quick carrier tutorial of what to do, what not to do. I'll probably show you both of them here. First off, I'm going to go over basic fit. I'm in a Nidhogger right now. I am using Tech 2 fighters. You may not have to. Depending on the area space right now, we're in a decline, whatever it is. What you use is Greasta's weakest point for resist profile is kinetic fighters. So here I have Dragonfly 2s which deal kinetic damage. You can use Dragonfly 1s if you want to. Alternatively, you can use the thermal variants of them. Ratting carriers, Nidhoggers are preferred along with Thanatoses. Why? Because if you show info on the carrier, you will see here that they get fighter damage bonuses and fighter velocity bonuses. The command and the support links or the support bonuses aren't as big of a deal. First thing, if you're new to carriers, you'll figure out that their align time is fucking slow. Look here, this one is 26.9 seconds. I have most of my navigation skills maxed to level 5. Highs, fighter support units, Tech 1, Tech 2s if you can. This one's just a cheap shit fit. Network sensor array, that works kind of like an insane sensor booster, and all of our capital routing ships are required to fit a Sino on. Make sure you have ozone as well, as you can see down here. What I run for a tank, which is pretty light paper thin tank, I use a capital shield extender 2. You can use a capital shield extender 1 if that's all you can use. I use an adaptive invulnerability field, and I use 2 X-type kinetic deflection fields. You can get away with just running one of them if you want to. In the mids, Tech 2 omnidirectional tracking links scripted for tracking speed. In the bottoms, you run standardly with 4 drone damage amplifiers. Faction will get you better ticks. I run with the Faction omnidirectional tracking enhancer. You can alternatively use that as a damage control too. In the rig slots here, I'm using, because I'm being cheap, hyperspatial velocity optimizer ones. Really, you can use pretty much whatever you want in there. You want more speed or more damage. Just be aware that the capital drone rigs do not apply to fighters. So there is one for speed that does work with fighters, but most of them, like the sentry drone ones, obviously do not apply to fighters. So with that out of the way, keep in mind that your new capital ship can only dock an appropriate size citadels. So for industrial complexes, you need a Citadel. For the combat citadels, you need a Fortizar or larger. You cannot dock in Asbels or Osterhasses. You can still tether on them, however. Alright, so I'm going to check local here. Looks bluish. I look at Intel. Always keep your Intel window open. As you'll see, there's plenty of other stuff here that I'm ignoring. Keep your Intel open. You're looking for large blobs of people that will give you a heads up. So what I'm going to do now, I'm undocking. Wait here, control space after you undock. Here I've already picked out the haven sites that are rock havens. If you're not aware of how to see if they're rock haven or not, simply click warp to and then control space quickly afterwards. If you get a pop-up message on the haven, then it's rock haven, like so.
Warp drive active.
Controlling spacing, get the pop-up. That is a rock haven. So these are the ones you want to be fighting at in your carriers. So now what will end up happening is I will turn on my hardener and my omnidirectional tracking. Notice I put the sino off to the side. You do not want to hit that by accident. As much as it can save you and you can get help, if your system is not sino jammed, it can also get you killed. So with that said, I'm going to go to my first haven. For what I'll do first of all is I will align to said haven. You'll see notice my tactical overlay or overview is on. That should be this button right here. Always keep this on if it's not already. Wait till this aligns out. Once you're lined out, right-click on the haven, warp to 30 kilometers. You do not want to warp any closer because you'll get stuck in the rock geometry there.
Warp drive
Warping to
active.
30 kilometers. This here is my pants down time. Reason, if there's a newt or a hostile that comes into local, I am already in warp. There is jack all I can do but hope, cross my fingers, and pray. So for this first warp, um, it's, as you see, the warp speed and align time is pretty damn slow. The Nidhogger is the fastest align time out of all the carriers, so it will get worse from this point. If you're using Thanatos, Chimeras and Archons are not preferable, simply for the reasons they get all tank bonuses. They deal less damage, and which will meaning smaller ticks for you. Once I land at the site, first thing every time, I set destination to the Fortizar. I align. First thing you do, always align to your out. Aligning. Once I've aligned there, I will turn on my network sensor array. Click my launch button on all my fighters. As you'll see, I have mine stacked up here, so it's a little bit easier to click, less movement speed. Holding down the Q key, notice these are selected by the highlighting behind them. If you control click like so, you can select your capacitor as well. I'll control click again, as I do not want my actual ship selected, and my key inputs will follow whatever I'm doing. So now I'm holding down the Q key, which will give me a crosshair here. Once I click, it will give me an up or down axis. I will click again. You do not have to click on it. I can click past it here. And now my fighters will approach that spot. Now I'll quickly lock up the fighters, the NPCs part, from smallest to largest. Then I will attack, click on an NPC, and I'm putting one fighter on each of these. Because these are all selected, any of my F1 through F8 keys, I believe, will go, my keybinds will go to here. So I'll select a battleship, press F3. These are the heavy rocket salvos. You get 12 of them before you have to reload them. Now you'll see me locking up the pirate gate. And it'll show you what I do. Drag and drop it down below. I'll be using that as my orbiting point. This is invulnerable. You can't deal damage to it. Now what happens is, once your fighters kill something, they stop at 0 meters a second, almost instantly after whatever you're targeting dies. Especially in between waves, this is important. Holding down your W key, you can hold down W and click on the pirate gate. Anything you have selected, you will target them to orbit that object. Like so. If you look down here, orbit, they're now orbiting that object. While I'm locking up the new NPC, they will be orbiting that, keeping their transversal velocity up, making them a lot harder to hit. They don't take as much damage. Again, Geo here, that's actually a guy in Corp. He's just a jerk, so we have him as -10. Thanks, Geo. So always kill the smallest stuff first. They track your fighters better. They'll deal a lot more damage to it. These are also the ones that web and scram, which they can web and scramble your carrier down. I am an extra paranoid person, and what I'll end up doing is I will realign holding down A, then left clicking. You'll also notice that on my overview, I have them sorted by icon type. If I sort them by icon type, whatever you set as your destination, in this case I've set my destination as the Fortizar, will either appear at the top or the bottom of your list, like so. The ships will always appear at the top. Your warp out point will always appear at the bottom. Provided you have your drop down selected long enough, your warp out point will always be at the bottom. In this case, I will never warp to the Fortizar. I will right click in space. As you see here, I have a Fortizar Sino spot bookmarked. That is where you want to warp to ideally. If you have to warp to it as panic measure, sure. But ideally, you want to be warping to a Sino bookmark on there. If you don't know how to set up a Sino bookmark, please ask myself or somebody in Corp. We will help you. So reorbiting the pirate gate again. Locking stuff up. Don't want to attack the battleships first. There we are. The heavy rocket salvos apply much larger damage to larger targets. That's why I always use them on the battleships. For optimal ticks, you get a tick every 20 minutes. Whatever you end up getting, you end up getting. Um, but to get the fastest kills, meaning highest ISK per hour, you want to use your heavy rocket salvos, the F3 key, as often as you can. Hopefully on the larger battleships, at least when it comes to using a carrier. Reorbiting the pirate gate again. Locking up all the targets here. There we are. Heavy rocket salvos on the battleship. You'll notice I'm getting 0 ISK per hour. That's because it's currently Corp Day, and we're donating 100% of all of what we get into the corporation. Depending on your fit, skill set, if you're using Tech 1, Tech 2 fighters, I almost said drones, you will be getting anywhere from the low end if you're using an Archon, which is the crappy Archon or Chimera, which is the crappy routing carriers. You'll be getting somewhere around maybe 30 million ISK per tick to Nidhogger with Tech 2 fighters and faction drone damage amplifiers all fancied out, bling bling. You can be pulling off 60, 65 million ISK ticks. Orbiting the Pirate Gate again. This is the second to last wave here. Now with here, I will use all 3 fighters on one of the cruisers. All these cruisers E-War. In this case, it's Grease to spin, and they jam, which is a pain in the ass for your fighters. You want these dead as quickly as possible. This one here obviously failed as jam because I'm still attacking, but if they don't, it locks one of your fighters out. If it locks one of your fighters out, they can't attack, in which case they're not moving or orbiting, which goes along with your F1 auto attack that's going on right here. So now here I've run out of my heavy rocket salvos. I will recall fighters, press F2 to micro warp drive them back to my ship, and now we sit here and wait for a good damn minute or so. This may seem like a long wait. It is. For your ISK per hour, this is the optimal way to run it. You want to spam your heavy rocket salvos until you run out. Now, what I'll do also here is in local, if you see the people in local, because there's getting a couple more, left click on them to select one of them. Press Control A. You will see them all highlighted now. Any new players that enter the system will appear here, but they will not be selected. That will help you identify with who's coming into the system so you can easily or more easily notice them. So I'm still looking at here, looking down at Intel as I'm waiting. As you can see, even with my shitty tank, no active rep. There's a new guy here. Control A again to make sure they're selected. Nothing of note that's close to me in Intel. Okay, my fighters are done reloading. Launch again. I will attack them at this guy. Notice it's too far, only 70k. The fighters, as you'll see, however, will still approach. Once they're within 70k, you can click on it again, and they will start attacking. As you see, it's so far into fall off, I'm doing 0 damage. You can micro warp drive them in. If you do, be aware of the sig bloom and make sure they keep orbiting things. So I'll micro warp drive them back in. They're attacking this. Heavy rocket salvo on it. I'm pressing W and orbiting the next battleship before the previous one dies, so they're still moving. Especially when you have a micro warp drive on them, you need to be aware of this or you will lose fighters. They are not cheap. Orbiting the pirate. This is the last way. Lock up all of these things here on the cruisers in the last one cruiser per light fighter. I'll try to lock up as many targets as I can. The battleship, I'll heavy rocket salvo off here. Then I'll go back to auto attacking on the cruisers. They pop pretty quickly. Lock up the remaining. Another new dude in local. Control A, he's a blue. Control A again, sorry, I must have deselected that. Look down at intel, still nothing new reported. I'm orbiting the next battleship before it dies with the W key. W now. Orbit, left click on the locked target. You'll notice that this keeps getting deselected because my push to talk key unfortunately is my shift key, which is a modifier key. Mildly annoying, but a non-printable character nonetheless. With battleships, you want to put all three of your fighters auto-attacking on the single battleship. If you put them one on each battleship, you will still eventually kill the battleships, but you'll be battling the reps of three of them versus battling the reps of one of them. You end up killing them faster if you end up doing it this way. At this point, I would probably start aligning out for my next site and repeat this whole process over again. Again, align when you land. There's a hostile right here. So first thing I end up doing is I'm pulling my drones in, micro warp driving them back to me, right click in space, Fortizar hard Sino spot. Here, warp to 0. And I'm in warp.
Warp drive active.
This gear is a known Sino dropper. I am in warp, so I should be good at this point. Most of the times, that's a risky procedure. By pulling your fighters in, waiting for them, you should actually be warping to that Sino bookmark that you've made. Again, if you don't know how to make a Sino bookmark, please ask myself, Blitz Hacker, or anybody in the Corp, and we'll help you out. You'll see me warping in here. There is no active weapons timer. If you attack another player, you won't get a tether within 60 seconds of an active weapons timer. I do not have one of those. I'm warping back in. I'm landing on the Fortizar, and as you see, as opposed to landing the edge here at 0, my bookmark, which is one of the many here, will put me right here, nice and safe back home. Now that I've got that, do not lock up. I right-click approach location. This is important because if people are trying to bump you off for whatever reason, here Fortizar not being a large issue because I can dock here. Some of the times you do not always have that novelty of where your warp out spot may be an Osterhaus, for example. What you do at this point is I would just dock up my character. Never ever rat with a dropper in local. You can and you will die. You have no warp stabilization on standard carrier hull. And even if you can, some of them are good enough to bump you out of alignment and screw you up. So now that this guy is in local, I am unable to continue ratting. What I have to do now, I'm docking my carrier back up. Again, make sure you have all your fighters in the bay. There is no reconnect to lost fighters option, and they are not warpable objects. If you, for whatever reason, end up leaving your fighters in space and docking up, you have to combat probe the fighters down and get them in. As you'll see here, they are attributes. They are 1,000 M3 each. They're 27 here, 9 per squad, 3 squads. 27,000 M3 of stuff you need to scan down with combat probes and pick back up, carrying back, and then putting them back in your character once your carrier once you're docked. Not fun. Try not to do that. So, docking back up here.
Request accepted.
Now, you may or may have not have noticed this is not integrally important in a carrier. However, it is very important if you do ever graduate to super carriers for whatever reason. Combat ratting otherwise. You press the escape key. In your shortcuts tab here. I'm trying to find it. combat. Navigation, pretty sure it's in there. This, select next target, select previous target. If you bind these, if you have a mouse with buttons on the side of it, which I generally don't like using ever in any games, this will help you a lot. Your next target and your previous target. With there, if you have any locked up targets, which you lock up by pressing the left control and left clicking on your overview for NPCs, for example, you can press the button on the side of your mouse, which will advance it to the next locked target you have, so that you can just click your auto attack button and then it'll press your side mouse button to advance it to the next target, then the next one, then the next one. It saves you a lot of travel time and a lot of carpal tunnel syndrome. Anyhow, after you end up doing that, that is pretty much in a nutshell all that you need to know about carrier adding. If you have any questions or if I've missed anything, please feel free to mail either Blitz Hacker or anybody in Corp, and we'll help you out the best we can. Thanks a lot and fly safe.